Guys, thank you for joining us on Critical Hits Collegiate Community, where today we are joined by John Shifty Stansfield of RPI's prolific Overwatch team. We are so happy to have him joining the program. We love when collegiate athletes in the esports field have such an amazing season, such a crazy success story. This is that type of storyline that we wanted to bring to you guys, get you guys excited in the scene, and especially for those who might not be the most familiar with Overwatch, we are standing with a titan here in this call. So Frank, walk us through exactly why we are dealing with such a legend, right?
Yeah, so obviously we want to discuss a lot about your passion as an esports community member. But first, we need to talk about the success you had at RPI this last year in Overwatch. You won HV GamerCon 2019, becoming the ECAC champions. In spring 2020, you guys were 5-0 before the end of the season there. You guys have had an amazing start to your program at RPI and Overwatch. Tell us a little bit about the success you guys have had in the last few years.
Yeah, well, here at RPI, it's mostly nerds, a lot of tech geeks. And so we kind of, even though our school is smaller than some of the other big pick schools, the people we're selecting from are already pretty good in most cases. So we're blessed with a lot of talent on our teams for sure. And it's definitely not just me. I would say that of the people we have on the teams nowadays, I'm definitely lower on the tier list.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys calling me a good player and a legend or whatever.
I mean, well, we got to gas you up. You did win MVP at GamerCon, and I was reading an article where it said that you made a lot of huge plays for the team to kind of come up clutch in the tournament. So tell us a little bit about that tournament at GamerCon 2019. I mean, obviously you had a good event winning the MVP there. So tell us a little bit about how you guys got to that championship. You only lost one map along the way, you mentioned. So what happened there? Why were you guys so dominant?
So in that LAN, it was our first LAN, so we were kind of nervous going in, but we were also really excited. We had done really well in the season. We were pretty confident. We definitely thought this was going to be our chance to take home a title. And we really wanted to bring that to RPI because our club was recently founded at the time, and we really wanted to. We actually had one of our founders, we founded the club. I don't want to jump ahead, but there's also people before us who were kind of mentors and guides for the program, and especially our really older players and some people who are now long since graduated. They kind of had an informal version of our club that was just kind of friends playing CSGO or Overwatch, and we had one member of that group on our team, IB Jack. He was one of our support players, so we really wanted to, before he graduated, give him that win and bring that home for him as well. So it was a very meaningful tournament. And going in, we had done a lot of scrims, a lot of practices, especially against players who were going to be in the tournament. So we had a feeling for what they were going to do and what their weak points were and their strengths.
Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest parts of our team's success was probably the play from our tank line. And I mean, I don't want to say that just because I was in the tank line, but
you're fine.
Definitely
you can go for it. No.
Ult usage was important, and I think even though we were sloppy at times, which I think it does show in some of those VODs, for the most part, really good ult usage, good cycling, which was really important, especially in that meta.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we were wondering if you could kind of walk us through exactly why that strategy was so successful in 2019, but where Overwatch and meta sits now, why having a tank line isn't that safety mechanism that it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think as anyone who continuously plays Overwatch nowadays, especially if you're a constant grinder of competitive, you've probably seen that Reinhardt is not really popping off now. Shields in general took a hard hit very recently, but back then, I mean, in the end, Goats meta was really fun as a tank player. Reinhardt, Zarya was all about aim and tracking, which is a really high level skill, and it really showcased people who were normally DPS players were suddenly on Zarya 24/7. I think that was a really cool moment in Overwatch history. Yeah. But as long as you had good tank line and you guys focused on good shield management, good bubble management, good engages, moving as a team, and avoiding your supports being cleaved by Reinhardt swings and stuff like that, you would end up with really high output of damage, and pretty much you'd be so survivable that as long as nobody's died instantly, you pretty much won the fight immediately. Versus nowadays, No,
go right ahead.
Nowadays, it seems I don't want to be toxic, but it mostly comes down to who has a good Roadhog player, because Roadhog is very important in the current meta. It's kind of hook or no hook, that kind of decides every team fight. And obviously Zarya is still out there, still shining, but kind of relies on Roadhog to get ult charge. And that is a little bit different than what we're used to. Roadhog Zarya, I mean, if you had pitched that years ago, people would be like, what are you doing?
So I'll ask you very quickly, you don't have to go. We talked a lot about meta there, but obviously a lot of people watch the OWL, the professional league, and what are some big differences you see in play in terms of meta? Obviously, the skill level is a whole different animal on its own. But like, what's some major differences you see in the professional to the collegiate side in games like Overwatch that you're competing in?
Yeah, I will say, especially when you look at OWL, a lot more focus, especially in the current meta, but even back then, on really good precision hit scan. Like, even when it was GOATs, sometimes a hit scan pick could potentially cause a lot of value, even though shields are everywhere and it seems like nothing is killable. I mean, in the end, if someone's that good with their aim, they can do a lot. And especially right now, where the DPS are still kind of taking a back seat right now, but I think especially as we look at OWL, you'll see that, you know, the Ashe hit scan with the Mercy Pocket is still able to do so much, especially when you have Roadhog Zarya, because then there's just so much pressure that Zarya can't shield, and it becomes a lot about positioning. Every Ashe is basically a Widow. Every Widow is basically an insta-kill versus Roadhog. So it forces tanks to think more about where they are and what they're doing and why. And there's less just taking space for your hit scan. It's more like surviving long enough to get near an objective and control that area. So I think the way tanks play now has shifted a lot, and I think it shows more in OWL than it does in like your average comp game. Because in your average comp game, someone just picks Monkey into like Ashe, Reaper, like everything, and they can still pull it off sometimes if you get a really good jump, but like it's different.
Right. So you mentioned that shift in meta, and I was wondering, because it seemed like the reason the tank meta was kind of taken out by Blizzard was they got a response from the community that it wasn't the most riveting product to behold. What do you think has changed in terms of OWL and maybe like the viewership as the result of the meta becoming much more like a Twitch hit scan focus, as you mentioned, like something like Counter-Strike, like something that it's competing against like Valorant?
Right.
Do you think it's drawing in those viewers from those sports coming into Overwatch where the positioning isn't the main focus? You do kind of get that FPS action. How have you seen that in your experience?
Yeah, I think OWL has a lot of strengths compared to other esports because of the meta shifts that Overwatch experiences. Like, I actually don't think I loved GOATs, but I think for the amount of time it was in the game, it was kind of bad especially for the pro scene. Because someone like me who plays a lot of GOATs or who did a lot of VOD reviews on GOATs, when you see pros play GOATs, you can like pick it apart, and even just the small things are like really interesting and exciting. But I think for the general audience, something more like a Twitch shooter is a lot more like visceral and easier to understand. Like when you see someone hit a headshot after like grappling as Widow or something like that, everyone can look at that and be like, oh my god, he's way better at aiming than I will ever be. Like, that guy trains every day. Versus when a Reinhardt like outpositions a couple swings and gets like a huge ult percentage increase and fire strikes the back line. Like, everyone's like, wait, what's happening? Like, I get where it's coming from. So I think I don't mind the changes that Blizzard makes to try and bring hit scan to the forefront and stuff like that. I hope they do it in a way that still makes the tanks and supports important. Like, especially Mercy players nowadays are getting a lot more playtime, which I think is good. I think Mercy is a good hero. Like, people are always like, oh, Mercy mains, like, they don't get to make that much input. I think Mercy mains have a lot of input, especially with getting mid-fight reses and spacing people out and baiting people. Like, if people are trying to dive your Mercy and she's just unkillable, that like wastes their entire engagement. So I like when Mercy can be played. I really do, even though it's not very good for like a heavy tank line like a Rein Zarya. But I think in the state it's in right now, the hit scan aren't really being challenged, in my opinion. Like, it's Hog Zarya. It's kind of a lot of, there's like no shield at all. And that just kind of means that hit scan is reigning supreme simply because there are no shields. I like it better when a hit scan has to think about how they can avoid shields or how they can catch people out of position. And I think that is a better place for Overwatch to be in, because that's the difference between, in my opinion, a game like Overwatch and a game like Valorant. The diving, the shielding, stuff like that.
Right. So you mentioned that discrepancy, and I just wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit. Is this something that you're seeing in your practices when you're scrimming these other universities, or is it in these actual tournaments themselves? Have you noticed this changes in the actual competitive games that you've had? And if so, do you feel like they are in the same way as you would see in OWL, or is there a bit of a differential between the skill ceiling we see with the type of play you guys are able to do as a collegiate team versus something on a professional level like an OWL?
I mean, so I think Collegiate League will always kind of reflect OWL. OWL will always have some very big differences. Like, you'll see it every time. Like, we'll go to the next OWL and they'll have figured something out. They've been secretly like practicing this entire time, and they've figured it out for months, and no one has picked it up in Collegiate. That can definitely happen, and it usually does. But in terms of the general play style and the general picks, it stays pretty similar. Like, you can watch a collegiate game and it will look pretty similar to a pro game. I think collegiate games are a little bit more likely to have crazy upsets and like big twists because there's more room for mistakes. I mean, in the end, we're collegiate players. We still have homework and we still have stuff like that. Versus these pro players, I mean, they definitely still make mistakes, but on the overall, like, the grouping, they're all very skilled players and they're less likely to allow for a big play to happen or to allow for like a great upset.
So we spent a lot of time here talking about just now, like, the meta of the game and game design, and transitioning to that. We know you're a game design student, and we can obviously tell that there's a little bit of a, not even a little bit, I'll just say very straight up, a very strong connection between work and passion for you on the side of playing and obviously game design as well. So, like, how does being interested in both sides of the gaming world, like obviously the design side and also being a competitor, how does that like influence you just as a gamer in general?
I would say that I've loved being on both sides because it gives you a new appreciation for everything that Blizzard does. I mean, sometimes, you know, from the player side, it kind of like comes forward and I get mad about a change they make or something like that. But on the most part, it's just interesting to see the creative decisions that Blizzard makes. It gives me a new appreciation for how a company can balance the feedback from both their major audience and the OWL. I think that's a really important thing for Blizzard to keep working on, is at the same time that I am a very competitive player and I like the game to be a competitive game, that's not what everybody is here for. So I like it to be an esports playable game, but I don't need it to be exactly what the pros want or exactly what the collegiate scene needs. Like, I understand that there's a lot of people out there who are playing just quick play every day and they're grinding their arcade, and I love those people and I play arcade too. It's fun, but yeah, it's a tough balance to approach as a game designer as well, and I hope that Blizzard will continue to do a pretty good job and I can learn from them and stuff like that.
So along with being a player on the team and a high-level player in the collegiate world, you're also the co-founder of the club, as we talked about a little bit briefly earlier in the episode, at RPI. So now you serve as a club officer as well. And tell us a little bit about that experience of being at the head of the esports club, co-founding it there at RPI. It's kind of like what your little community you have at your university is like right now.
Yeah. I mean, right now, specifically, it's a little bit different because of COVID, but we are hoping to still get a big amount of people trying out this season. We made a frag montage from like all of our games, and I mean, it's not all frags. There's Rocket League in there too, so I guess big play montage. But we're hoping a lot of people will be interested in that and still come to our events and stuff like that this semester, even though a lot of people will be full remote. But in terms of going back to when things were more normal or more how it used to be, as I said, the club was originally an informal one made by our upperclassmen. And coming in as a freshman, I just saw the posters and I was like, oh man, I love Overwatch. I can't wait to play. Keep in mind, at that time, I was an off-tank Diva one trick who was really, really, really bad, like low silver. So getting into the game...
You're like me now, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah. But the thing is, I was in that level of play because I didn't want to take it seriously. At that point, Overwatch was still like a fun game for me just for the fun of it. But getting into the scene and making the friends that I did and meeting the people that I did, it motivated me to try harder. And like, when you take it to that level of seriousness, the improvement is insane. I mean, I went in with probably like 4 other silver players of different roles. And by the end of a year and a half or so, everyone that I knew that was my friends back then were at least in like masters. So, I mean, most people were better than me. Like, they ended up getting the GM. But and I'm not jealous about that at all. But in the end, I just was amazed at how much getting a group of people together that you really all care about the game and are willing to put the time in, it makes a huge difference. I would say for anyone who's like worried about their SR, just take that time to really look at what you're doing and get other people who care as much as you do, because that makes all the difference.
Right. So I just wanted to ask, is that like part of your sales pitch for joining the club? Because I know that outside of being a player, outside of being a JV coach for the CSGO team, which I'm sure has some overlap we can go into as well. I just wanted to ask, like, when you're trying to pitch esports to people who may be like, oh, this is just another club, and it's not necessarily something that has a community around it. It's just something that I can do for a little bit of time. How do you take an esports club from that amateur level to the pro level? And when you do that, what does that change in attitude for your members and for your future teammates mean?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it is definitely a pitching point for us to say, oh, these players were this and then got to this, and, you know, we have coaching and you will get better to different varying success. But in the end, we just want to create a club where people can come together, make friends, play the games they love, because that's the core of it. It's not really, in the end, it's not purely about the esports. Like, I struggle to separate that sometimes because I am coach and I do play on the teams. But we want to create an environment where people can actually come and play the games and have people that are looking for the same level of intensity as they are, because I think that can be hard, especially in our college environment where everyone's constantly working and just trying to make some kind of like connection at RPI. It can be tough. And I think that a lot of people are more familiar with the in-game setting for talking about like their experiences and who they are as a person. And so in the end, I hope that our club helps people express who they are and meet people who are like-minded, and that's the end goal for me. And in terms of making better players, I always want the next like year of players to be better than I was, but that might not happen. Like, we do the best we can. In the end, it's up to them to decide how far they want to take it. But yeah, I always hope that the people coming after me will be better than me, because if that happens every year, then I can look back a couple of years from now, I'll be like, I wonder how RPI is doing, and I'll look at it and they'll just be like win after win after win. That's what I hope.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned how you want them to be better than you guys, but those are some big shoes to fill. Like last year, you guys had your in-person tournament. You won the ECAC championship at the Hudson Valley GamerCon. You beat SUNY Canton, and even in 2020, before you guys obviously had to shut the season down, you guys were 5-0. So clearly, these aren't. You know, I know you like to be very humble, but this is, you know, these are some big shoes to fill. This is a pretty impressive record, and so I'm wondering, from a team cohesion standpoint, from a having that open level of comms and having that best level of play come out from your players, what do you do as a coach to facilitate that level? Because you don't get there without being able to like openly communicate with your guys, tell them when something's going wrong, and having that attitude that takes the criticism well. So what do you do as a coach in esports to facilitate an environment where that happens? Because we know that people in playing online competitive games are not always receptive to criticism.
That is a very fair point. I think that's a good thing to bring up. I think this is advice for anybody who currently has an esports program at their college. I would say do meetups. Have the team come together, see each other in person, get a slice of pizza, go out for ice cream, like something that people like to do that isn't expensive, where they can just talk. Because when people are never meeting each other in person, or like only here and there, and they don't really get to know each other, it's way easier for them to get mad at each other or blame each other. That's why the competitive scene, when you're just queuing online with randoms, is so toxic, because people don't want to have to look at their own flaws. They want to try and tear down other people to make themselves feel better. And when you know everyone and you care about their well-being, instead of throwing stuff at other people, you look to yourself and you see what you can improve. So I think beyond any other special coaching technique, the most important thing is making sure that your players have an understanding of each other, that they care about each other, and that they're engaged in the game at all times.
As we close it up here, I want to ask you, obviously you spent some time now competing in the ECAC. How have your experiences in collegiate esports kind of like shaped you overall? And what do you say to anybody who's interested in joining the competition with like in conferences like the ECAC and collegiate level of competitive gaming?
Yeah, I would say definitely do it. I would say if you don't have a program yet, start one, get involved. TESPA has a great program. They actually help you build your club by itself. If you're interested in Overwatch or other Blizzard games specifically, TESPA is a great outlet. I will say that TESPA tournaments, because of their easy onboarding and their outreach, tend to be harder because there are better schools in there. And so if you're looking for a little bit more better starting out, I would look local first, so like regional or even smaller, like just towns sometimes have tournaments depending on what game you're talking about. But if you can't go local, I would say absolutely ECAC actually has a very strong process. I love any place that has a LAN, like an in-person tournament, try and get there, because LANs are magical. There's something really cool about being there, having a crowd, people laughing, people screaming, people booing you, like whatever it takes just to get that feedback it's on a different level than playing online.
All right, Jonathan, hopefully we can actually see more LANs soon in the near future once everything becomes safe again to have those LAN events. Anything you want to pitch as we close out the show here? Any social media?
Yeah, I mean, always just check out Team RPI Esports. We keep putting stuff out on social media. We're going to be having a lot of events throughout COVID times, and hopefully when things open back up, we'll be doing a lot more in person. If for some reason you actually are an RPI student and you're watching this, I don't know why you're not in the Discord. If you're not, please do that. We love to have you, and we love to have you for Pug Night every Friday night. So.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of Critical Hits Collegiate Community. Once again with Jonathan, Shifty, Stansfield. Thank you so much for joining us. And guys, you can find this episode, other episodes of Critical Hits, and a lot of awesome esports content just like it on the Esports U Network channel on twitch.tv. If you have some questions, some comments, you think we missed a question, tweet at us. I'm Rob_Flax, and Frank
Salerno _. Jonathan, why don't you throw on your Twitter too? You have one? You want one you got a pitch or?
Nah, I don't really use Twitter. I'm very anti-social media.
Hey, listen, I hear you. Sometimes it can be rough out there, especially in the gaming world sometimes. But all right, thank you guys for watching this episode of Critical Hits. We'll catch you guys next time. Have a great day, everybody.
See you guys next time.